Do you believe that we are living in a time of progress in scientific knowledge, in nuclear physics, space exploration, communication by satellite, electronic technology, the discovery of DNA, the genetic building block of life, the control of diseases, the improvement of agriculture? And do you believe that this vast accumulation of knowledge is continually improving in certainty and spinning off more and better technologies for the benefit of human life? If you do, you are an 18th century mind, a mind that believes in the truth and progress of science and its benefits to humanity. And David Hume, the philosopher to whom we are about to turn, will drop a bomb on your belief in the truth and progress of science in his first philosophic work, a treatise of human nature. The time is 1740, almost exactly 100 years since Descartes wrote the Meditations in 1641, and the world has profoundly changed. During the period of 125 years from Descartes' death in 1650 to the death of Hume in 1776, the philosophic life of Europe was at the highest point of intensity and self-confidence, of vitality and optimism it has ever known. This period, from 1650 to 1770, is known as the Age of Enlightenment. Our own philosophical president, Thomas Jefferson, was an Enlightenment philosopher. The philosophic outlook and the mood of the Age of Enlightenment swept across Europe and America. This was the source of the greatest surging self-confidence, vitality, and optimism. The Age of Enlightenment perceived itself as the age in which the light of human reason was replacing the darkness of the Middle Ages, replacing scholastic philosophy, religious dogmatism, and political absolutism. So great and widespread was the optimism of the Age of Enlightenment that it could only have come from many different sources, from the rapid growth of trade and industry, the rise of the upper middle class, and especially from the vitality and progress of the new sciences. The greatest single achievement in the new sciences was that of the British physicist Sir Isaac Newton in his great work called The Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy, written in 1687. Newton's Principles, as his treatise came to be called, was without doubt the centerpiece and the most esteemed of all the scientific achievements of the Age of Enlightenment. It was so tremendous a work of synthesizing the scattered fragments of existing scientific knowledge under a few simple principles that it stands forth as one of the greatest scientific achievements of any age. Newton soon became the very symbol of the Enlightenment, the very symbol of the power of scientific reason to discover the rational laws which govern the physical universe. The entire physical universe, according to Newton, is mechanical, a world machine. Everything about the machine, from the motion of the planets to the falling of an apple from a tree, can be explained by the mechanical laws of motion. The physical universe is thus through and through causal in all its workings. The universe is a system of causes and their necessary effects. Such a system is called deterministic. Everything that happens in it is necessary and the inevitable result of antecedent prior causes. Nothing can be other than what it is. Everything is what it is by causal necessity. No material body can be free from this necessary causal determinism. Under the influence of Newton, the 18th century Enlightenment philosophers asked, if physical nature is a harmonious order governed by necessary laws of nature, which reason can discover, why is this not also true of human nature as well? Is not the human sphere also part of nature? And is it not also governed by harmonious, orderly, natural laws? In England, the philosopher John Locke argued in 1690 that there is indeed a law of human nature governing all human beings and that it is knowable by human reason. The law of nature for human beings, John Locke argues, was that all human beings are equal under the law, all are rational, all have the same natural rights of life, liberty, and property, and the same obligations not to infringe upon others' rights. John Locke's words are memorable. He says, and reason teaches all mankind who will but consult it, that being all equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. With these words, John Locke justified the English Revolution of 1688, often called the Bloodless Revolution, which firmly ended the absolutism of the British monarchy and placed power in the people and their representatives in Parliament. Locke's words affirming a law of nature and natural rights for all human beings were soon used to justify the American Revolution of 1776 and the French Revolution of 1789. And these words entered loud and clear into the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America in the language of our President Thomas Jefferson. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. For the age of enlightenment, human reason was king. It had discovered the laws of physical nature and of human nature. But in the face of the age of enlightenment, which based its optimism on the powers of reason to discover necessary laws of nature, another viewpoint, totally different, was developing, which was destined to undermine and destroy the self-confident rationalism of the age of enlightenment. This other viewpoint was, of course, empiricism, which relies on observation by the senses and experimentation as the only reliable source of any knowledge that we can have. Empiricism arose in the early years of the 17th century under the same pressure as rationalism was, to try to offer a theory of the method used by the new sciences, which were the most important single development of the entire modern world. What kind of method did Newton use in establishing his law of gravity? Both rationalists and empiricists claim Newton for their side. Rationalism, as we've already seen, is the claim that reason has primacy, is the most important source and test of truth. Rationalism agrees with Descartes that in all areas in which knowledge is sought, we begin with clear and distinct, self-evident and true axioms, from which we deduce other truths, constructing a deductive logical system of truths. This is how, the rationalists claim, Newton constructed the deductive system of mechanics. By reason, he deduced from basic concepts such as mass, energy, and from the laws of motion, an explanation of the entire physical universe. But empiricism looks at the work of Newton and points out that Newton's method was by no means like Descartes. Newton's method, they say, was just the opposite. Newton, the empiricists claim, began with observation of facts, with the data of sensory experience, aided by new scientific instruments, in order to find regularity, lawfulness, and order. Only then was Newton able to construct a logical system out of the laws he had discovered. Who were the empiricists? The great names of empiricism are all British. The high point of the flourishing of empiricism is in England, Scotland, and Ireland in the 17th and 18th century. As philosophical rationalism is linked with Descartes and with French and continental European culture, so philosophical empiricism is linked with the philosophers and with the culture of Great Britain. The classical British empiricists were John Locke, who wrote the essay concerning human understanding, George Berkeley, who wrote a treatise concerning the principles of human knowledge, and the great David Hume, who in 1738 wrote the treatise of human nature. With Francis Bacon as a forerunner, the development of the logic of British empiricism was the work of these three philosophers, Locke, Berkeley, and Hume. The fundamental principle of empiricism is that sense perception is the only reliable source for gaining knowledge and for testing any claims to knowledge that are made. Sense perception includes direct observation by the senses, the use of instrumentation such as the telescope and the microscope, and the use of experimentation. From the very early days of empiricism, in the work of John Locke, empiricism shows itself to be a deliberate and defiant rejection of philosophical rationalism, and especially of Descartes. All the empiricists rejected what they came to call Cartesianism, the rationalistic building of great deductive systems of philosophy, purporting to have grasped by the powers of reason alone the nature of total reality, of man, nature, and God, and claiming to have achieved also complete mathematical certainty in this knowledge by the use of logical deduction from self-evident axioms. In sharpest negation and rejection of this, all of the empiricists are suspicious of metaphysical systems constructed by reason. Empiricism constructs no great metaphysical systems of philosophy. It offers no speculations, it offers no worldviews for humans to live by. It remains only a theory of knowledge, an epistemology, which is a word derived from the Greek meaning simply theory of knowledge. It is a theory of what we can know. Empiricists claim that we can know reliably only what comes to us by sensory experience, by observation and experiments. Thus, empiricism claims that the only adequate basis for knowledge is that sensory experience, the flux of the sensible world, which the two great rationalists, Plato and Descartes, rejected as an inferior way of knowing. And from this basis, in sensory experience, as the source and test of knowledge, empiricism as a theory of knowledge becomes a powerful engine of destruction, a wrecking ball, which is soon swung against all the structures built by reason in philosophy and theology, and demolishes them as no knowledge at all. How was this done? Beginning with Locke, empiricism as a theory of knowledge raises two questions about our knowledge. First, for any statement in any field whatsoever that purports to tell us anything about the world, the empiricists raise the seemingly simple, seemingly harmless little question, how do you know? To this little question, there is only one kind of answer that an empiricist will accept. An answer that says, I know, by pointing to the sensory observations that are the source of my knowledge. To the empiricists, if you cannot answer the question, how do you know, by showing that your knowledge rests upon sensory experience, upon observation of data, or upon experimentation with data, you are bankrupt. You have no knowledge. Your claims to knowledge are worthless. But can Descartes' metaphysical dualism of mind and matter meet the question, how do you know, by showing that this dualism is based upon sensory observation? Obviously not. It is based not on sensory observation, but upon reason. Can Plato's theory of the forms, can Plato's divided line of knowledge pass the empiricist test question, how do you know, by pointing to empirical observations? Obviously not. It was based upon rational reflection, upon reason. Do you hold to any philosophic beliefs about the world? Or do you have any religious beliefs about a divine being? Or any political philosophy about how society ought to be governed? If so, is there any way in which you can successfully answer the empiricist question, how do you know? What observations of data, what sense perceptions, what scientific experiments can you point to as the sole source of your philosophic worldview, your conception of a divine being, or your political philosophy? Obviously, there are none. And so your claims are ready for demolition by the empiricist wrecking ball. The second question which the empiricists raise is a more fundamental one. This second question which the empiricists raise is this: what kind of instrument is the human mind, and what are its limits? What is the human mind equipped to know? This second question is also intended to devastate, reject, rebuke, and demolish Descartes and all builders of rational theoretical structures of philosophy. Attacking Descartes and all such metaphysical builders, the empiricists say, before you undertake to construct a great philosophic system, Why don't you ask the basic question? Is the mind equipped for such metaphysical excursions into the heart of reality? Are there perhaps limits as to what the mind can know, limits as to the origins of its ideas, limits as to the certainty it can achieve? These two questions, how do you know, and what are the limits of knowledge, dominate the powerful development of British empiricism from Locke to Berkeley to Hume. This development gathered momentum as the devastating, relentless questions become more sharply understood by the empiricists themselves. John Locke, as the earliest in the line of British empiricism, is, as may be expected, the most conservative and the least destructive in pursuing the hard questions of the empiricist program. Yet he states clearly and prophetically the role which empiricism will have in the subsequent development of philosophy. There are, says Locke, master builders whose mighty designs in advancing the sciences will leave lasting monuments to the admiration of posterity. But, Locke adds, it is ambition enough to be employed as an under-laborer in clearing the ground a little and removing some of the rubbish that lies in the way of knowledge. Locke, in these prophetic words, is looking into the future horizon of philosophy. It will indeed be the case that empiricism, by the two questions, how do you know, and what are the limits of knowledge, will cast so much doubt upon the construction, the building of great systems of philosophy, that there will come a time when there will be no more master builders in philosophy. And there are no master builders in philosophy today. The role of philosopher is also, as John Locke prophesied, to be an under-laborer, clearing the ground a little, removing rubbish. What is the rubbish the philosopher removes? Why, rationalistic rubbish, of course, such rubbish as Plato and St. Thomas Aquinas and Descartes wrote. But what is the under-laborer clearing the ground for, since nothing is to be built and there are no master builders? The empiricist has no answer to this question, except that it is desirable to recognize rubbish and to clear it out. The first rubbish which John Locke decided to clear away was, as you would expect, a piece of rubbish created by Descartes himself. It was Descartes' theory of innate ideas. The theory of innate ideas is the theory that some ideas are innate in the sense that, as Descartes said, they are born with us. They are imprinted upon the soul. Examples of innate ideas, as you remember, are the idea of substance, cause, God, and the rational principles of logic. Locke's line of attack against Descartes' theory of innate ideas is clear. It is by way of the question, how do you know that these ideas are innate in all human beings? What data of experience, what sensory observations, what empirical evidence can you offer in support of this theory? Can you show by pointing to the data that all humans from infancy on possess these ideas? But surely, on the basis of empirical evidence, there are many who do not possess the ideas of God or of logic as infants or ever. Therefore, said Locke, the theory of innate ideas is worthless rubbish. The mind, he says, is not a closet filled up at birth with such innate ideas. The mind, he says, is an empty closet. Changing the metaphor, he argues that the mind is a blank tablet, blank white paper, on which experience writes, and this writing by experience is all the mind can know. Locke says also that all our ideas have only one source, and that is experience. What then is Locke's theory of knowledge? His aim is to show that the origin of our knowledge is in sensory experience, in sensation, through the mind's receiving impressions made on it by external objects. The only other source of knowledge is our reflecting about our sensory experience, as in reasoning about it, doubting it, or believing it. Locke, who thinks he is independent of all previous philosophers, nevertheless takes over from Descartes Descartes' view of an idea as meaning anything the mind thinks about, any objects of the mind. Locke also takes over from Descartes the subjectivism of Descartes. Descartes' view that what I know best is my own mind and its ideas, and thus there enters into empiricism the problem inherent in subjectivism, which we already found in Descartes, that there is a chasm or gap between my own mind with its ideas and the physical objects and human beings which are external to me in the physical and social world. How can I get to know them since I am confined to knowing my own ideas? How can I have true knowledge of objects as they are, independent of my mind in the world? Poor Locke, who also takes over from Descartes' idea that physical substances and their qualities exist. Poor Locke runs into excruciatingly painful problems. As an empiricist, Locke can only know what originates in sense perception. He cannot claim to know anything by clear and distinct rational ideas. He cannot claim to know by the help of God. How does he know that physical substances exist? Has he ever had experience of a physical substance? How does he know that our ideas of primary qualities belong to physical objects? And so the wrecking ball of empiricism takes aim at John Locke himself and his theory that physical substances exist and have primary qualities which produce secondary qualities in us. It is George Berkeley, the Anglican Bishop of Cloyne in Ireland, the second in line of the great British empiricists, who conducts the attack upon Locke. How could an empiricist indulge in the now outmoded concept that physical substances exist? Locke had failed to follow through on the basic empiricist principle, which is that we can know only what comes to us in sensory experience. And so Berkeley pushes ahead with the argument of empiricism and demolishes Locke's acceptance of the belief which Descartes and Newton had held that physical substances exist. We can never have sensory experiences of physical material substances, says Berkeley. We can experience only sensory qualities. What is my actual experience of substance? It is only the experience of qualities. I perceive a tree as of a certain size and shape. I perceive the diameter of its trunk, the length of its branches, the brown color of its trunk and branches, and the green color of its leaves. I touch its rough textures, and I smell its woody aroma. But I can never perceive its substance. All that I have perceived of the tree are its qualities. I have no perception of a substance. The existence of physical substances, Berkeley goes on to argue, is thus only in their being perceived. Physical substances cannot be known to have any other existence than in the qualities we perceive. Thus, Berkeley's empiricism is more radical than Locke's, in that Berkeley destroys the belief in physical substance which Locke was still clinging to. What follows from Berkeley's argument is that the material world exists only in being perceived as qualities. Thus, matter, physical substance, the physical universe, these do not exist. Bishop Berkeley left intact, however, two major structures of thought. He did believe that mental substances exist in the form of finite minds and also in the form of the existence of God as infinite mind. Berkeley also believed that the laws of nature, which the new sciences had discovered, were reliable in their orderliness and regularity. Berkeley could not, of course, say that the laws of nature were laws of physical objects, since physical objects for him do not exist. The laws of nature for Berkeley are only the laws of our own perceptions or ideas. But like Descartes, Berkeley called upon God to solve problems in his philosophy. Berkeley assured us that with the help of God, our perceptions are reliable and orderly, and that we can trust in the uniformity of experience and in the dependability of scientific laws. Enter the Scotsman David Hume, the last and most rigorously persistent and destructive of the British empiricists. We have seen that Berkeley, as a bishop of the Church of England, had spared from the wrecking ball of empiricism mental substances in the form of God's mind and human minds. Berkeley, as a bishop, had to spare God's mind and human minds. But Hume gleefully asks the empiricist's little question, how do you know that mental substances exist? We will see the idea that there are mental substances, God's or a man's mind, collapses under Hume's attack. But there is a second structure which Berkeley left standing, and that is the solid reliability and uniformity of scientific laws of nature. Will Hume let this last structure stand? The age of enlightenment, the age of reason, of optimism, springs from the passionate conviction that human reason had at last discovered many of the true laws of nature, and that these laws of nature were absolute and necessary causal laws, such as the laws of astronomy, the laws of physics, the laws of chemistry, the laws of physiology. And we have seen that the great burst of optimism of the age of enlightenment was based upon the belief that the future would see the continued discovery of new scientific laws which would turn into more and more benefits for the life of humanity. Is not this belief in what the future of science, technology, and democracy have in store for us, is not this what you believe in your better, your happier, your more optimistic moments? It is what the age of enlightenment was passionately committed to, and nowhere more than in the hearts of the founding fathers of the United States of America. But Hume demolished the very foundation of this entire view of progress of the age of enlightenment. He shattered the pride of the age of enlightenment in the necessary causal laws of Newtonian mechanics, of physics and astronomy, chemistry and physiology, by denying that there are any necessary causal laws at all. How Hume managed to swing the wrecking ball of empiricism at this great structure of science, we will now proceed to see.
Pre-recorded in the studios of the Maryland Center for Public Broadcasting.